Hey everybody, this is John Sherwood with johnsherwood.com, where we seek to fuel faith in the 21st century. And today I've got a great privilege of being able to have a little conversation with a good friend of mine and pastor of a church in Atlanta, Georgia, Angel Maldonado. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. So I know that you've been up to some big things there in Atlanta, pastoring a church, The Path, and have been able to be a part of this organization growing as one of the founders of the AND campaign, which I just learned about this year. I've been seeing it, and you guys just came out with a recent book, and I've been doing some really great things. Tell me a little bit about the AND campaign, how you got started in that, what the sort of origin story of AND campaign was.
Yeah, so the AND campaign came about as just a few people trying to figure out how we can do good. As we saw where politics and culture was heading, and how polarized it was becoming. And there's always been a history of that at different times, but of course we are in a heightened state of that right now.
Right.
And so back in 2015, I connected with a friend and colleague of mine that I had met through a leadership organization here in Atlanta called Lead Atlanta. And I just posted something that Rick Warren had posted on Twitter and retweeted it about, hey, even though I disagree with your decisions or your choices, doesn't mean I don't love you, something to that extent. And I had already been on this process of trying to figure out as a pastor, like, how do I minister to our members during this time? Because for a while I was kind of raised up with the philosophy of, as a pastor, you're apolitical. You just preach Jesus, and Jesus is enough. And yes, Jesus is enough, but we know that Jesus calls us to be the light and the salt, and engulf ourselves to in society and culture to reach as many people as possible. But it was a very much, we keep our distance from that. But we couldn't keep our distance anymore because, through the Obama's presidential years in office, his second term, just started seeing a lot of different things come up, and no longer were the members kind of shielded from all that. It affected everybody, from race to sexuality to everything, gender. I mean, all this stuff that we started to really talk about. And I felt ill-equipped to be able to meet the needs. And so I was trying to figure it out, and other people were trying to figure it out. And God just brought us together. Like I said, through this random tweet, we connected, had breakfast, heard his heart. Justin Giboney, who is the president of the AND campaign now, got together with Sho Baraka, who's also one of the founders and a Christian artist who came up with 116, Lecrae, and all them. And we had a meeting with just people we thought would be interested, and just came out of it with, we don't know what's going to happen, but we got to do something. And from there, we just talked about really the fact that we don't have to choose as Christians whether we're going to be compassionate or we're going to have conviction, whether we're going to fight for justice or whether we're going to have biblical values. Like, we don't have to follow the lead of the world. We need to follow the lead of the scriptures first and foremost, and figure out how to uphold that in politics and in culture. And so that's where the AND campaign came out of.
So the AND campaign's goal is to be able to resource, equip, and advocate for a Christian worldview in the midst of our secular political landscape. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so, good luck. Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, we need a lot of prayer. Yeah.
That is not a small feat, and nor has it been for any Christian in all of civilization to figure out how are we to be this light of this other kingdom whilst in the midst of another kingdom. And that's difficult and not always clear cut, not always black and white, and often can even have differences of opinion and viewpoint even within that Christian worldview. And so that is a laudable goal and mission that you guys have. And I know one that is very apropos right now, because obviously we find ourselves in maybe one of the most charged and divisive political seasons in recent, history here for us in America. And I know for me, I see it in the church as well, that divisiveness and that division and that quarreling and the animosity and enmity, even amongst brothers and sisters in Christ, because of these varying worldviews and differences of opinion, and trying to understand what is opinion and what is conviction and where do those lines fall. And I know recently, I want to plug, you guys just came out with your first book by InterVarsity Press called Compassion and Conviction, a guide to faithful civic engagement from a Christian worldview. And I know I had a chance to read this, and I have already recommended it to the congregation that I lead here in Asheville, North Carolina. I think it's a great place for Christians to start, to begin to really consider and think about, how do I take my convictions that are biblical? How do I take my worldview that is given to me from the King Jesus? And how do I participate and activate those things in the midst of the civic arena? I know, much like yourself, I have come from a spiritual pedigree of sort of politics, which I think, has value and has its place, but obviously there are some downsides to that too. And you start to come out of that place and start to wonder, okay, if I am going to be politically active, civically engaged, how do I do that? Because it can feel like just overwhelming. Where do I begin? I mean, is there any place in the civic arena for a biblical Christian worldview? What stakes do I put in the ground? What hills do I die on, and which ones do I not? And it can feel like a massive endeavor of skillful compromise. Personally, that's how I can feel. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and I know that many people in churches all throughout the country, I'm sure, are trying to figure this out and maybe rethink what they have viewed and held in positions in the past, because obviously our civic arena and our societal values have really shifted quite a lot on a large scale over the last several decades. And so thank you for what you guys are doing. I would definitely highly recommend this book. So let's get down to some real brass tacks types questions, right? The questions that I'm sure people are already thinking about. Some people are like, oh, you heretic, you're not apolitical. Some people are like, oh, you're not political enough, and everyone's going to want to know, who are you voting for, right? So I will spare you that question. But, as we look at a political landscape and a civic arena that is often, which even the book talks about, often marked by and identified with identity politics, things that are very unchristian, slander and gossip and scandal and, selfish motives, right? And so how would you personally, and also as a pastor, how would you share with people how to engage an arena faithfully that seems so faithless, an arena that seems so unfaithful? How do you step into that in a way that's faithful to Jesus?
It starts by reading your Bible and really educating yourself in an arena or a specific place where you feel passionate about, because not everybody is going to feel passionate about, even within politics. There's so much that's going on, right? I mean, even if whether it's education reform or justice reform or there's local politics and there's federal. There's so much to. So I think it starts with. And Andy Stanley has said this, and it stuck with me. What breaks your heart? What are you passionate about? And then really figuring out, what has already been done? What's the history behind this? Let me educate myself. And then third, what do the scriptures say about this? Because one of the things that, as I've gone on my journey and I've opened my eyes to a different worldview, to kind of start studying out, okay, where in the scriptures have I seen God's people engaged politically, engaged in culture in this way? And then you start looking and you start seeing examples of a Daniel, right? Who was Pharaoh's, Now I'm thinking about Joseph,
Right, right,
Joseph, who was Pharaoh's right hand man, and then Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar, and honestly, so many different kings, or you can say administrations that he
right.
had influence over,
That's right.
and how he was able to do that.
Mm,
You even see in the New Testament, which I love, is in the book of Acts, because people say, well, Jesus didn't focus on all that, but people forget that, well, yes, you had the Roman government, but the Jewish people in itself had a form of government,
right.
and so he had to deal with that, and he spoke truth to power. Then you have Paul, who went into different cities, and I love in one of the stories where it talks about how he was causing a ruckus, and they wanted him to come out and speak, and the government officials, it says the government officials, his friends, held him back.
Mm,
And I said, wow, just little things like that where you start looking at, okay, disciples and God's people throughout the world have done this. And then you start thinking about, okay, well, how can I do that? And you pray and you ask for discernment, and you get advice. But having a base of people is really important. Having a team of people where you're not feel like you're on your own with this, because then that's one of the first things we try to accomplish is just start with a base. We're not going to meet everybody's needs or likes or preferences, and campaign is not for everybody. But what we found out is, as we started talking about these concepts, more and more people were like, yes, I understand. I'm with you. Like, this is what I've been thinking, but I haven't been able to put them into words. And so over the years, we launched officially in 2016. And over the years, we've seen God just bring people together. And it's been really cool to see people from all different walks of even the Christian realms, from all different denominations, and finding a place where we can unite on, as
right.
opposed to looking at all the stuff that we can be divided by. And man, we can unite on doing good for the community. We can unite on justice. We can unite on being a light. We can unite on Jesus. Let's just get like, we follow Jesus. And so that's been one of the really cool things we've been able to see. And the more the base has grown, the more confident Christians have become to engage. And even, what's been really cool is people involved specifically in politics, where we say, the Bible transcends politics. And we have people from the AND campaign that are both on the right and the left, who are both Democrats and Republicans. And we believe that's necessary for the way our country runs, to have people on both sides, but be able to be united on Jesus. And then seeing the younger generation, I have guys at Morehouse College that I mentor and disciple, and who are involved in politics, who want to be more involved. And we're able to say, okay, you don't have to allow the world to form your worldview at a younger age. Now you have a resource, and this is how you can engage moving forward.
So let me ask a personal question, if I can, right? I'm a white guy, right? I lead a predominantly white church in a very predominantly white context part of the country in Asheville, North Carolina. You're a brown pastor leading a predominantly Black and brown congregation. How have you seen in your congregation of predominantly Black and brown members, how have you seen the membership wrestle with their faith in Jesus and their allegiance to his lordship and his kingdom, while in the midst of a societal context that seems to be more and more, whether that's reality or perception, but more and more, oppressed and agitated and marginalized, right? Like, how have you seen Black and brown Christians wrestle through their faith as they feel more and more oppression from the context around them? What's that been like, and how have you tried to lead them through that?
It's been tough. It's been tough. A lot of grief, John. A lot of grief. We feel our Black and brown fellow people, just people hurting, and we see ourselves and put our family members in those situations. When a Black man gets shot or Black woman gets shot, it's like, that could be my husband, so wives wrestling, like, make it home today, honey, and so there's been a lot of grief. So that's where we start is just by, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to lament. It's okay to grieve, and not talk yourself out of it. And so that's where we start. And from there, it is, okay, well, we grieve, but then we have to allow Jesus to be Lord of our emotions. And so we have to talk through it. And what I encourage all of our Christians to do is to make sure everybody has a safe space to talk freely about how they feel, because you got to have it. I mean, it's the worst thing is to not have somebody or a group of people you can talk to in a way where they'll just listen and be understanding, and just start there, right? So you can get out your emotions, and just like this is about like anything else, as long as you're able to get it out, then you can start moving forward with that. And then the third thing is, okay, now how is the Spirit moving you to get behind something? Because what I've learned is that with a resource like the AND campaign, or with different outlets to actually be involved, Christians they just feel better about when tough things happen, because the helplessness and the hopelessness is not there as strong, because, okay, I'm doing something. Right. Even if it's as simple as prayer, even if it's as simple as, hey, I'm praying and fasting once a month for our country, I'm doing something. Or if it's something like, hey, I'm going to be leading a group of volunteers to go and register people to vote, I'm doing something. Or I'm going to focus on making disciples. Like, I'm going to focus on making disciples, and I'm going to help people with what it means to make Jesus Lord over their politics. In that sense, although we all should be doing that, but even in something as simple as that, Christians can feel like, okay, I'm doing my part. And then there are some victories. We're not going to fix it all. Right. There's going to be more police shootings. This is not heaven. So we have to figure out how to live in this world with the pain, with the challenges, and still be that light. And so those are a few things that have helped us.
And so, if I may, what kind of recommendation or suggestion, what kind of advice would you give to a pastor such as myself, who's leading a more predominantly white group of Christians, and to those groups of Christians? What kind of advice and direction would you give them on how they can, and how we can also be engaged, how we can also lament, how we can partner with our brothers and sisters, even though we're not necessarily having all of the same exact shared experiences?
Yeah, I think for everybody, it's understanding. I like how you shared that, because I think for everybody, it's looking around to see, okay, in what ways has God positioned me to make a difference? And I don't have to be guilty. I don't have to feel guilty about not doing what this person is doing, what that person is doing. I recently had a conversation with a sister about how she doesn't feel like she's doing enough on social media, and she's not using her influence, and yet she's doing so much in her own home with her young family, with her, with different relationships that she has. And so that's very important to say, okay, well, God, how do you want me to engage? For white pastors, you got to have some real conversations with your members. I mean, you just got to have some real gut level conversations about bias. And it's okay. We all have it, but we gotta be okay to say it. You are in a more liberal part of the South.
It's interesting. It's kind of like oil and water. So in the heart of Asheville, in the city proper, it's extremely liberal. But then, 10 miles, 15 miles in any direction, it's extremely conservative as you reach the more rural Western Carolina mountain areas. So it's very much a culture clash, actually. It's the two primary counties in this area are 95% Caucasian. But politically and ideologically, you have a very strong polarization from left to right, obviously. And for sure that same paradigm influences the church and comes into the church as people become converted, and as they're learning to walk in this new kingdom of Jesus and not the kingdom of the world. So that the context that I'm in, it's pretty polarized politically and ideologically, but not ethnically and racially.
And I think that's where you could start specifically, because you may not be able to have a racially diverse church. Just won't be, just not where you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. But how can you help? How could you prepare your Christians to go out of their way to be an ally, as that word has been thrown around a ton? And what I have found from specifically white men and even white pastors, the ones who are most like Jesus in their race relations, let me say it like that, are the ones that have either been forced to or have put themselves in a situation where they are the minority. Because that is the one group of people, the one group of people where you really don't have to be the minority in any situation in your life. You really don't have to be. Right. And so many times you have to go out of your way to do that. And I know you have put yourself in that position, in that place. Right. And it helps so much, whether it is as simple as serving in a third world country, where you are a minority, or putting yourself in a church or a group of friends that you're the only white male or a few white males, even helping your children be in that position, your family be in that position. It just helps because white men are used to going in and having answers and going in and calling the shots and going in and having everything tailored towards your majority culture that in America you have created, while everybody else has learned to have to be flexible and have had to learn how to go into a culture that is not, even with women and men, right? Even with women going into mostly male corporate environments, whatever it is, every other person has had to do that except for the white man. And so that's one advice that I would give any white man and white pastors: put yourself in a place to be minority.
Let me fire some things at you here, because this is really good, right? And for the audience, Angel and I have known each other for a long time. We were able to partner together in college ministry 15 years ago, while Angel was working primarily with historically Black colleges and universities, and I was working with some other universities around the city area. And so we've been dealing with these sorts of conversations for many years now. But as you say, right, and I just want to fire this back at you because I want to hear your response, because I can hear some particular types of people and how they're processing what you're saying. And as you say, hey, this is the type of culture that you have created as a white man, a majority culture that you don't know what it's like to be a minority. You've not really been in that, or at least you've not had to be in that. If you have been, it's probably been by choice to some degree. So what would you say to the person who kind of rebuts that, says, well, but I didn't create that, right? This is one of the narratives of in response to white guilt, right? White guilt is something that, again, has become a catchphrase in our culture, and something that's become very popular recently. And it's very real. I see it all the time. I felt it personally, in my own journey. So when someone says, well, but I didn't create that, right? I didn't shoot that guy. I didn't create a culture in which, it's not wrong for me to be white, right? Like, I think sometimes people can hear that, even though I know that's not what you're intending to say. How would you respond to someone in helping them to process what you are saying and not hear what you're not saying, right? In terms of being a part of the majority culture, in which I wasn't necessarily personally responsible for creating in my own personal decision-making, at least not advertently, at least not directly or intentionally, right? How would you respond to that from a Christian worldview?
I would quote James 1 and say, be slow to speak, quick to listen, and just encourage you to ask those questions. Because I think I hate to give a cookie cutter answer to that, because
I set you up pretty bad there. Sorry.
Yeah. And people do give cookie cutter answers to that. I don't want to, because it just depends where that heart is coming from. Humility always pleases God, and humility always leads to understanding and wisdom. And so if a person is humble and they're seeking understanding, as the scriptures say, then they're going to be able to see a different perspective. Whether or not they agree, that's perfectly fine. we live, you know, what's supposed to be in a pluralistic society where it's okay to have different, it's supposed to be okay. Like that's like,
right.
it's supposed to
Right.
be okay.
Right.
And in my circles, that's where I want to be at, where, and I feel like I have in building those relationships where it's okay for you not to understand everything, but I don't understand everything about your life either. Now, if there's a defensiveness and there's a pride there, and I'm like, I'm not really going to be the one to help you. A brown man, you know, like is not going to be the one to help you do that. It's probably going to be better to come from somebody like you, and to help your own people in a sense. And so that's what comes to mind when you ask that, John. I hope that helps.
For sure. And I think by way of example of what I think you're talking about, you know, I've been leading the local congregation that I lead through some conversations over the last many months. And we had an experience where I had invited actually some of my Black and brown friends from other places in the country to join some of these conversations because we don't have large representation, right? And so in the midst of this, I actually said something just, you know, sort of in jest and off the handle. And then I followed back up later in a smaller group setting that one of my Black friends was a part of. And I said, you know, I just recognized that I said this. Was this triggering in any way? And he said, yeah, actually it was. And he and I are very close. And there was a much older white couple on the call that heard that, and they were flabbergasted. And the woman burst out into tears like, I would have never have thought that what he said would have been offensive. And I don't want to be offensive. And she's crying like, I just want to love Jesus and love other people. And I feel like I'm so ignorant and ill-equipped of how I might even be. And so I invited them and this Black brother to talk, and they actually got together offline themselves and just dialogue, got to know each other. That she was wanting to have that posture, and her husband were wanting to have that posture of humility that you were talking about. Hey, I just want to listen. I just want to learn. Like, my experiences are not your experiences. I would have never have understood what he said as offensive, but you did. And I want to know that. And I thought that that was very exemplary of the Spirit of Christ, that we want to understand each other. We want to, we want to forego our own rights for the sake of loving other people, both inside the body of Christ and beyond. And I remember that was, and you know, I felt like an idiot, of course, because I was the trigger thing that made it all happen. But I thought, you know, this is good that we learn how to dialogue through what's uncomfortable. We learn how to engage in each other's pain. You know, we learn how to listen to each other cry and cry with one another. And I think for me personally, one of the things that I have experienced over the last many months and the last couple of years especially is just that we don't know what we don't know. And, you know, our reality has been shaped in such a way, and it's easy to sort of assume, even without knowing it, that that's everyone else's reality. And I think it's just really important, like you said, to really fight to have that posture of humility, to learn, to listen, to be, you know, slow to speak, and to trust, especially in the body of Christ, to trust each other's motives and hearts, that our motives and hearts are all to follow Jesus and glorify God. But we're trying to do that in a very fallen, broken state of existence, and to have a lot of patience with one another. You know, it's all the stuff that you talked about earlier about, you know, knowing your Bible. It's all the stuff that it talks about in there.
It's in there.
Ironically,
we should be most equipped to be a light, to be reconcilers. I mean, we should be most equipped to be able to do that. If we just,
why do you think we're not? Because you're absolutely right. I agree with you. We should be the best equipped. Why do you think at times we're not?
I think because of, we just hadn't talked enough about how to make Jesus Lord of our politics. You know, we just hadn't talked about that enough. Make Jesus Lord of the one another, how to live out the one another scriptures in this specific way, which I think God has given us a chance to do. And I also know that people come from different backgrounds. So the other side of the spectrum is people who grew up in churches where politicians came in and spoke, and where churches are part of a political party, right? And so we're dealing with both of those things. And there has been, man, it's just been horrible theology, honestly. It's just been horrible theology on it.
Yeah. Have you
And
checked out?
we allowed the culture to really dictate how Christians should engage in one way or
Right.
another. So
Right. And even for some of us, like in our particular denominational heritage, maybe even our theological heritage there, which has been, very strongly apolitical, which again, I think there's some merit and value to some concepts there, but maybe have been um, practiced in such a way that are harmful and detrimental. I personally would recommend Yoder, which is a classic on Jesus and politics, is the name of the book, Jesus and Politics, or The Politics of Jesus, I believe is what it's called. I think that's a great place if you're looking for an academic theological look at how do we discern our role as Christians and followers of Jesus in the realm of politics, and what did Jesus do in that sense in the New Testament. And obviously, I would highly recommend Conviction and Compassion. And you can go and check out the AND campaign at andcampaign.org, A-N-D campaign.org. And Angel, it's been really great being able to have you here on this call. One just last final note, is there any final bit of advice or word of encouragement that you would like to give the Christian church, the disciples of Jesus, in the midst of this very divisive and tumultuous societal, cultural landscape that we're in?
I think we covered a lot of it. Overall, it's so simple, but just spend time with God. Allow God to minister to you with all the feelings that you're feeling. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to go through it. It's okay. It's okay. Let Jesus meet your needs in a new way. And then the other thing I will say is just set some healthy boundaries for your own heart. You don't have to be involved in every situation that happens. You don't have to know about it. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to. I mean, not at the expense of your peace and your relationship with God. Find how God is leading you to make an impact. What specific needs are around you, and be secure in that. Because if everybody does a little bit, a lot will get done.
Yeah. And maybe my final closing thought is the only thing that would be wrong for us to do is nothing. Angel, love you. Really appreciate you and all that you're doing, and may God bless you and the work of AND Campaign.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate the opportunity.